shining a light on the women creating an impact, leading organizations and mission-focused strategic programs across the federal technology and consulting community. This is Impact. I am being joined today by Carmen Jenkins, the Vice President of Growth and Technology at ITegrity. Carmen, thank you for hopping on and joining me today.
Miriam, thank you so much for having me today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And as I mentioned, I listened to the podcast you have and so much great insight from the other women that you have interviewed in this program.
I love listening to everybody's stories. So tell me about yours. Tell me what it is you do over at ITegrity.
So at ITegrity, I lead up our growth and technology strategy. And so work with our team to say, how can we apply the skills and the expertise we have in engineering and data management to serve the mission at the federal government that we are very passionate about. And NOAA is our largest customer. That is a client that I myself have worked with for about 20 years. And I'm just very passionate about helping the government serve citizens of the country better. So this is the role that I get to play in that.
What personal experiences have you found most rewarding in shaping your personal journey, and how have they positively influenced your leadership style?
So I have like two different perspectives here. One is kind of, I would say rewarding is a little bit of weird, but I would say it's a very influential experience.
Right.
I started off my career at GE as a software engineer, and moved into a supervisory role very early on, like the 2 years post-college. And one of the leadership roles I had was to actually then be in the supervisory role to the new people coming into the entry-level training program, leadership development program, at the time was called the Technical Leadership Program, that I myself had come through. The timing was such that 1 year or so into this first kind of supervisory role for me, the dot-com bubble burst, and huge layoffs just across all of the industries. And there was this very difficult decision that the company had to make, that they could no longer afford to run this technical leadership program. And we had just brought in all these new high potential college grads, and like many people, I mean, that was a year, I don't know if you remember, just having offers retracted. And it was just a really tough time for people to come into the workforce. And so I had to go and lay off all this team member. And it was very hard, and I was very much committed to we have to find other opportunities for them, and just kind of hustling around and networking and trying to find spots and opportunities or support where they want to go and what they want to do. I mean, I got a lot of perspective from that. I got a lot of perspectives about hard business decisions that might need to be made, that just sometimes that's the way it goes, and you have to deal with it. And as a leader, and I do credit for GE, they do give a lot of training and support on what your role is in a leader in that space. And it is not for you yourself to get emotional. It's like the decision's made. You have to shepherd this person to help them move on and be successful. The other perspective I took is that sometimes these things happen, and good people with talent, oftentimes it's a forcing factor, and they end up in a better position. And finding it never feels good on both sides. It doesn't feel good, and it's hard. And I also just learned about like doing for your team members, and it doesn't always stop even when they have to leave your team. And that was something. And I've had people come back to me decades later and say, "I never said this to you, but it was very meaningful." One person, it wasn't even necessarily one of the people impacted from that, but he came back and he said, "Look, I just appreciated that. Now I'm a supervisor, and that was something that impacted me, that I always appreciate and build into my own leadership style." And so that was very defining for me. It was a hard thing,
right?
But also just kind of learned about overall the theme is that you're dealing with people. Everything you're doing, there's business is business. In business decisions, there are a number of things. They're cold and they're impersonal, but everybody involved are people and they're humans, and you need humans and you need relationships to get all of the stuff done for the business. And that's, I guess, a perspective. And I would say the second perspective, more on the personal side, was the experience of parenting neurodivergent children. The journey to see there's so much strength, there's so much, but there's also these things that they struggle with. That doesn't mean they're not smart. That doesn't mean they're not capable, because they do things in a different way.
Right.
That really led me as a leader, I think, to come with more empathy and more understanding, to look for diversity and strength and understand this person may not be good at scheduling things or the fact that this person can't make eye contact does not mean that they are not an exceptional programmer, and that fostering an environment that has more awareness and understanding of all different types of diversity and learning about their strengths and their weaknesses and trying to help coach and create roles and environments that actually play to the strength. Weakness is often countered by a strength. For one example, one of my children is on autistic spectrum and has dysgraphia, learning disability of written expression. One of the aspects of that is that spelling is very hard. So sometimes, like I would say more old school in the way that I grew up, something misspelled and you think, how could this person, like that?
Yeah, right.
Like that's a defect of a person. Well, then I can realize, like, no, that's just, there's some people that just like, that is just something. Now we have a lot more tools and spell check and all this type of stuff, but it's kind of like, don't make a judgment based on that. First, seek to understand and then work with that. Don't seek to judge and to coach. That has been, I would say with this parenting neurodivergence has just really helped me to bring more empathy, patience, and a different way to look at strategy of team dynamics, to have a positive environment that fosters opportunities from people from all different perspectives and walks of life.
I feel like some of the most respected leaders too are the ones that are able to lead with empathy and draw from people's strengths and recognize what they are and help people draw them out of them. So,
yeah, it's something I've always appreciated and respected in my own mentors and people that I've worked for as well.
Absolutely. So what methods do you use to stay inspired and continue your growth as a leader? And how do you turn challenges into opportunities for development?
One thing came to mind is this: when I was in second grade, and my piano teacher, I was struggling. I was never very good at it in the end. He gave me this little plaque with a poem, "Don't Quit." One of these things that everybody's seen, everybody knows. But I have to say, I still have that plaque. I refer back to that all of the time when I'm going through a challenging time, because the overall message of it is like, these are the times that you're going to learn from. And give it some patience. You will come through this. You will overcome this. When there's challenges, when you lose that big proposal that you've worked at, these times when we have this discomfort are also the times that we are growing the most, that we are expanding, that we are gain a greater understanding of the overall systems and mechanisms. You're always going to have wins and you're going to have losses, you're going to have successes and you're going to have failures. And yes, celebrate the successes and try to have more of them. Your job, especially my job, is to grow business and to win more things. But you get better at this by really learning it and saying, okay, this didn't work. We lost this opportunity. Let's figure out why. What went wrong? Let's understand this. And then we can become stronger and we can become better. We cannot make the same mistake again. There's all types of reasons for why things fail. And we don't focus on a blame and a pointing finger. Instead, as an organization, as a team, we focus on, let's deal with the truth. Let's really explore what's the truth. Let's not sugarcoat things. Let's really learn and explore. Let's be honest with ourselves. If we do that, and if we do that as a team and we all come to a shared understanding of what happened, then we can come up with a shared set of changes that we should affect. So failure can be a positive change. As a background as an engineer, that is thankfully all innovation is built on many different failures. And so that's something I try to bring in. It's not that we want to encourage failing. It's just an acceptance that this is a part of the process. Each failure creates opportunities. So that's just the perspective I've always taken. I would say the second thing about staying inspired is to get myself outside my comfort zone when I can, try and explore new things. Sometimes that's going to work with industry groups outside of the work and hearing different perspectives, doing a public speaking engagement that's uncomfortable, getting yourself out of my comfort zone, figuring out where there's a chance to grow or where there's a chance to say, okay, this is not going to be one of my strength areas. So I know that, tried it, that's great. We'll move on, do something else.
I feel the same way about coming out of your comfort zone. I enjoy doing these podcasts. I've worked in radio, love this. Going to events where I have to speak in front of a bunch of people, oh my gosh, I'm sweating. It's awful. But I feel like once I'm done, I had a great experience and I meet a lot of people and make some really good connections too when you get to those.
Absolutely. The one thing I love about, I always feel like you have to connect outside of your own organization, because looking at different perspectives of the way other people approach solving problems or growing or building strategy. One, it's always evolving, and so you don't want to get complacent. And two, just a wealth of ideas to say, okay, would this work? Is this something we should try and explore? I think the most successful companies are those. I grew up in the world of GE under Jack Welch in my career, and I think that was very influential on me. You'll see, and he had certain phrases like "change or die," or if you're not changing, if you're not looking around the world and seeing the forces that are changing the landscape and adapting, then you will basically atrophy. And
right.
that was very, I think, informative to me in my career.
How can organizations create more supportive environments to nurture and mentor women to become emerging leaders, ensuring a vibrant and inclusive leadership pipeline?
So I would go back to kind of some of the perspective from my first answer, which is really about fostering an environment that comes with that kind of empathetic leadership and soliciting diverse ideas and perspectives, whether it's on the gender spectrum, whether it is on neurodivergence, whether it is on race, ethnicity. I'm a strong believer that, and I think the data supports that diversity within decision-making and diverse perspectives contributing leads to better business decisions, leads to better outcomes. To me, it's a little bit of a shame right now, the way I know there's been a lot of backlash around DEI, and there's a lot of very vocal people in business on both sides. I'm kind of like a data-driven person. So it's like, well, what does the data say?
Right.
And to me, the data says that you bring a lot of different perspectives to the table. You are more successful as a business. You're better able to grow. You make better decisions. You have less lawsuits, I mean, all kinds of things. And one of the things that I've learned is that when we surround ourselves just with like people and like ideas, there's a lot of things you don't consider. This is where I was working on site with a client, and the client was very much like, thou shalt be in the office at 9 a.m. There was no meeting, there was no thing, but it was just like, this is the thing. One of our strongest team members very often be a little bit late. The other perspective is she's a single mother. She has to get her kid to school at a specific time. Traffic fluctuates. There's that's the context. And I think we have to build in flexibility in context and really think about, like, does this rule we're putting in place, whether it's a dress code, whether it's a time, whether it's in person versus virtual, one, is this really a necessary thing for the business outcomes we're trying to get? Or is it actually hurting our business outcomes because we are really excluding or dinging people? You take someone who's a single mother and they're doing all this stuff. It takes the organizational skills and strengths and being able to balance multiple competing priorities. These are all strengths when you have the ability to do so. It's like, I'm going to be flexible. You need to come in at 9:15. You need to come in at 9:30. And let's say, okay, that's fine, because I'm going to focus on the job that you need to do and the contributions that you need to make. And if we can manage that with, these types of flexibility without impact, and frankly, maybe even improving your ability to do that, then let's do that. And so I think you often have to take a step back. You have to understand the perspective, and then you have to take a step back and say, why are we doing this thing? And is that the right thing for the business? And do we really need to do that? And if we can foster these types of environments that allow for flexibility where it makes sense, that actually serve our talented team members in a positive way, then one, you get greater engagement, you get greater commitment, you have a more positive team environment, people work together better, the trust is there. When you have trust, everything is much faster and easier to do. And so anything that we do for diversity is going to be better for women. And so I just feel like if you are taking it from that perspective, you will raise up the opportunities for women. And you need to seek out feedback. You need to validate. You need to question why the things are the way they are. And you really need to hear and listen to where people are having the struggles. And then you need to follow that up with also creating the opportunities and the visibility, the acknowledgement that there are systemic forces that need to be pushed back against to provide the visibility for the contributions of women, to find the stretch goals and opportunities for growth for the women. Women are graduating from college at higher rates. Women are studying STEM more. There's been some changes. It is not commensurate with the changes in the capability, in the skill set, in the power structure, in leadership of the companies. And honestly, my belief is that's bad for business.
Right.
It's better for business to come to a place where the opportunities are created for people that bring the skill and the passion and the talent. And so hopefully I wasn't too rambling, but that's
No, that totally makes sense. And thinking about, I was scrolling one of the social medias, maybe Facebook, and I saw that Shark Tank has a new season coming out. And I don't know if you watch that, but there's two women that are usually on it, but they don't often have them on at the same time. And it's almost like you can only have one woman at the table at a time. You see that a lot with companies. They'll have a woman, but just one, maybe two. That needs to change.
Yeah, I think it needs to change. I had this one experience where when I was, this was my second internship, and to date myself, this is when the internet was new. So we had a team called Internet Engineering, because this was an IT company. So it was all about exploring, like, how is this thing called the internet going to like impact our business? And it's like in all of the ways, But I was one female on a whole floor, and I'm this young college student. My supervisor would have team meetings at Hooters. Okay, I wouldn't go.
Right.
That impacted me in so many ways, in a negative way. I wasn't comfortable going because that environment made me very comfortable.
Right.
That was those types of things happen all the time back then, and it wasn't even blink of an eye. One of the things I found too is that you also have to point these things out. I've actually had this experience very recently, go into an industry event and walk into some kind of collaborative thing, and I look around and there's, maybe like 10% of the participants are women. There's like almost no women there. And I'm going to go to the organizer and I'm going to be, hey, I just gave you this feedback. Like, I'm all in, this is a great event, but like, you really should look at how you're getting this panel together, how you're getting this, because those are the opportunities where that networking, where that side business type of thing happens. The fact that there's just as many women in the workforce in this field, but they're not represented here. You need to think about that when you're planning events. So I tend to give that feedback, to vocalize it. That takes a risk. It can be hard, but I think when we're in a leadership position, we have to make those hard things. And to me, if I give that feedback internally at an organization that I'm working for and the leadership doesn't receive that well, to me, that's a flag to leave, because I'm like, if that's not important to you, I'm here. I'm a woman. That tells me I'm going to be really limited at this organization. And so I've kind of also just tried to build that into, that's a value. If I'm going to bring my talent, I need to know that you are going to value me on the same playing field as best as you can.
Exactly. So now, what exciting trends or developments in the workplace do you believe will positively shape the future of leadership, and how can leaders best prepare to embrace these changes?
So I think about two intersecting trends. One is like more social dynamic, one more on the technology side, let's say. And this I think will have the capability to shape leadership both in a positive and a negative way, which is artificial intelligence. Just like I was mentioning, like the internet, how's the internet going to impact our business in all the ways? That is the case. Artificial intelligence, maybe even more so than the introduction of the web and the internet. It is already impacting, but it will transform every aspect of every business. I fully believe nobody is exempt from how this is going to be impacting them, whether it is passively without their knowledge or whether it is something they are driving. So I think that there's risks, there's problems, there's challenges that need to be solved. There's real things to be scared about. There's real danger in how this gets applied. There's also huge opportunity. And I think any organization that is not figuring out and continuing to question and to figure out into it, because it is such a fast changing capabilities, whether it's the way you're doing quality control, whether it's the way you're doing creative and marketing, whether it's the way you're actually conducting your work, you have to be thinking about how can we leverage this in a way that aligns with our values? How can we leverage it to advance our mission? How do we measure its effectiveness? How do we put into place controls? I think that is something that all future leaders need to be strategic with the application of evolving artificial intelligence tools and investments. And how do I protect my people and my talent because the more that computers can do, the things that humans do that computers can't become very differentiating, So I don't know how it is going to impact the future of leadership, but I know that it will. It already is. And I just think that that's something all leaders who will be successful moving forward need to be continually educating themselves. The second thing that's intersecting, that's more on the social dynamics, is recently worked with a lot of very young emerging talent people coming in, Gen Z and even Gen Alpha. And I looked at what's the shift in social dynamics that come up with these generations that are entering the workforce right now. The world that Gen Z grew up in, where the internet has always existed, smartphones have always existed, selling being thrown at them 24/7 day, that's the world they grew up in. And they have very different skills. Like I see that, one, the ability to sort through the muck and the propaganda and really hone in on the data that I want to get and make all that noise. They have like a inherent skill that I don't think people have just because of the nature. That's the norm. They didn't grow up in a world where people all read the same newspaper or watched the daily news. They just didn't grow up that way. And they communicate the way that they adopt tools such as like instant messaging and Slack and asynchronous communication and virtual communication. This is something that's just a norm. It's not a tool for them. It's something they've always done. I mean, they've been in chat groups and instant messaging, from the time they're children. They probably don't even think about it as a technology. It's just the way that you communicate. They also grew up in a world that is much more diverse in all types of ways, and they're much more educated, different perspectives. And I think about, Gen Alpha, this will be a generation that really has not lived in a world without artificial intelligence. And what I get very excited from the different perspectives that come in with new generations and their different lived experience and their different ways of doing things. I mean, and what they'll tolerate, what they won't tolerate. So much less formal. We're not wearing a 3-piece suit to the office. We're writing and communicating differently, and we can make things happen that way. And so I tend to be like, lean into that a little bit. Let go of just the old school. I might have learned very formal methods in the way that my upbringing went. Sometimes you have to just let go, and you have to explore. You have to hear and listen and let these other methods try. Let's put up this different approach and let's vet it out. So just as we're creating spaces on all these things, it's also different ages and range brackets. I mean, I'm very excited about the younger generations coming up. And then it's kind of like, okay, how the years of experience and lived experience from decades in the industry with the energy and the excitement and the new approaches in different ways, and the passion about solving problems, adjusting to climate change, for example, that are coming in, and really just not trying to say like, okay, you got to put in your time, you got to do these menial things for a few years and work your way up in that way that might have been the norm 30 years ago, right? But instead to just be like, okay, how do I help you achieve the goals you want that are going to contribute to this business and maximize the energy, the talent, the perspective that you're bringing in. So I feel like that's exciting. I don't have much patience for complaining about the younger people coming into the workforce. I'm like, they're just thinking differently. And you know what? Yeah. They're going to be the future leaders. And let's see how our different lived experience marries together and can do different and innovative things.
Make great things. Well, Carmen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and sharing your story with us. I love it.
All right. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, Marianne.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you're keeping up to date on the latest episodes, and learn more at govforum.io.